Welcome to 8 Minutes Chinese. Today, we're unlocking the essential phrases you can use in daily life and master in your next business negotiation.
Have you ever watched someone, completely dominate a high-stakes negotiation without ever raising their voice, while, the loudest person in the room just walks away entirely empty-handed?
Oh, yeah. It is such a fascinating dynamic to witness, honestly. The person who's practically vibrating with aggressive energy, taking up all the oxygen, they end up hitting this wall of absolute calm.
Right, and their momentum entirely collapses. It drives me crazy sometimes. You're sitting there watching it unfold, and it feels like a psychological magic trick.
Yeah, it really does.
Because everything we're taught about power or about dominance and winning in the workplace, it all tells us that the loudest, most forceful voice is the one that gets the prize. We are conditioned to believe that whoever takes up the most space wins.
Exactly. But looking at the sources we're doing a deep dive on today, it seems like our entire modern playbook on power might just be completely backward.
Completely. We're looking at a paradigm that flips that hyper-aggressive corporate strategy entirely on its head.
Yeah, and to do it, we're actually going back about 2.5 millennia. We're looking at a single insight from Laozi's Tai Te Ching, specifically chapter 36.
Right, so the text focuses on a really famous Chinese idiom. The phrase is "ru ru sheng gen kuang." And translated directly, it means the soft and weak overcomes the hard and strong.
Which is quite the claim.
It is, and our mission for this deep dive is to extract that ancient concept and, translate it into a highly practical toolkit for your career, your negotiations, and just your daily communications.
Which is a heavy lift, because the phrase itself is a masterclass in counterintuitive strategy. It immediately challenges all our baseline assumptions about leverage.
Okay, so let's unpack this right away, because my immediate reaction, and I imagine the reaction of anyone listening who works in a hyper-competitive industry like tech or finance, is just deep skepticism.
Oh, for sure. It sounds risky.
Right. In today's cutthroat business world, doesn't defaulting to being soft or weak just mean you're going to get walked all over?
Yeah.
If I walk into a board meeting and project softness, that just sounds like terrible career advice.
Well, that skepticism is actually the perfect entry point. Because to understand why softness actually wins, we have to strip away all our modern corporate jargon and look at the physical realities of soft versus hard.
Okay, so getting out of the boardroom and into the physical world.
Exactly. Laozi intentionally grounded his philosophy in the physical world to make the abstract tangible. He looked at water. Water is formless, right? It yields to absolutely everything it encounters.
Yeah.
Yet over time, that same formless, yielding water will carve a massive canyon straight through solid rock. So softness in this context isn't fragility, it's adaptability.
Ah, I see. It's the capacity to absorb impact without structural failure.
Precisely. Now contrast that with the second half of the phrase, the hard and strong aspect. A giant stone wall looks incredibly powerful.
Right. But under immense sustained pressure, rigid things don't adapt. They just snap.
Exactly. It's like the classic biological observation, The massive oak tree fights the hurricane winds and gets uprooted, while the flexible bamboo just bends to the ground.
And lets the storm pass and then snaps right back to its original position.
Yeah. And Laozi actually takes this a step further with a parallel that is intentionally jarring.
Oh.
Yeah, he points out that a living human body is soft, supple, and flexible, but a dead body is stiff and rigid. So he equates softness directly with life, growth, and vitality, while hardness and rigidity are equated with decay.
Wow, that is a stark image. He's using that paradox to force a double take, isn't he?
He is. He designed this to be totally counterintuitive so that people are forced to stop and question what real power actually looks like.
Because we just assume power is a clenched fist. But he's arguing that a clenched fist is actually vulnerable because it can be broken, whereas an open, yielding hand cannot.
Right, and the underlying mechanism he's exposing is about how energy transfers. Rigid objects absorb the full force of a collision, but yielding objects diffuse it.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, because applying this physically sounds exactly like conversational judo.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Like in judo, you aren't opposing your opponent's force directly. If someone rushes at you, you don't step forward and create a massive collision of energy where, the heavier person automatically wins.
You just get run over.
Exactly. Instead, you use their own momentum. You step off the line of attack, you absorb their force, and you redirect it. You let them exhaust their own energy while you conserve yours.
And that translates perfectly to cognitive and social dynamics. You're stepping off the line of verbal attack and guiding that aggressive energy where you want it to go, rather than blocking it with your own ego.
Okay, the judo analogy makes perfect sense on a physical level. But if I try absorbing momentum when a colleague is shouting over me in a meeting, I feel like I'm just going to lose the room. How does this actually look in a modern air-conditioned office?
Good question. Let's talk about the mechanics of using this when you're sitting in, say, a tense one-on-one with a manager.
Okay, let's run a scenario. Let's imagine an employee who strongly disagrees with their manager over the direction of a new product roadmap.
Right. The employee believes the new direction will just alienate their core user base.
I have been in that exact seat. Your heart is racing, your adrenaline is spiking, you've got this mental list of all the reasons the manager is wrong, and you are just ready for a fight.
And if that employee goes in hot and argumentative, taking that rigid, hard approach, they are instantly triggering the manager's threat detection system.
Oh, absolutely.
Neurologically speaking, the manager's brain registers the aggressive tone, their amygdala fires up, and they shift straight into fight or flight mode. At that point, the manager is no longer processing the logical arguments. They're just defending their authority.
So both sides just dig their heels in.
Yeah.
You end up with complete gridlock. You aren't solving the roadmap problem at all. You're just having a territorial dispute.
Exactly. Now, consider the manager's perspective if they utilize the yielding approach. The employee comes in aggressive, ready for battle, but instead of matching that rigid energy, the manager they don't push back.
They don't pull rank.
Nope. They simply start asking calm, continuous, probing questions.
Things like, tell me more about why you see the user base reacting that way, or walk me through the specific risks you're seeing in Q3.
Yes. By asking those questions, the manager is performing a subtle neurological intervention, because you cannot maintain a state of blind rage while simultaneously executing complex analytical tasks.
Oh, that's fascinating. So by forcing the employee to explain their reasoning, the manager is literally pulling their brain activity out of the emotional center.
Right,
Yeah.
and forcing it into the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic. The aggressive employee, facing zero defensive resistance, just expends all that hot energy.
And because the manager is guiding the conversation with gentle questions, the employee often ends up talking themselves right into a more nuanced position. The pressure is simply absorbed.
You essentially drain their fight or flight energy by refusing to give them a target to punch.
I love that.
Yeah.
Let's look at it from the other side, though. Imagine you are the manager, and you have to initiate a really tough conversation. You have to give a harsh performance review to an underperforming employee.
Well, the default instinct for many managers is direct confrontation, right? Walking into the review, laying a file on the desk, and rattling off a list of failures, like you missed this deadline, your code is buggy, your communication is lacking.
Which, again, triggers that threat response. The employee either shuts down completely, or they get intensely defensive and start making excuses.
Yeah.
You lose their cognitive engagement within the first 30 seconds.
Because you attacked a wall with a battering ram. The wall's only function is to reinforce itself. But the yielding approach, the Ruru approach, starts entirely differently. It starts with curiosity.
How so?
You open the meeting by saying, I've noticed some gaps in the output over the last month. What's going on from your side?
Oh, so you open a door instead of swinging a sword. But here is the trap I see people falling into with this philosophy. Doesn't asking what's going on from your side just give the employee an out? It sounds like we're lowering the bar just to avoid making them uncomfortable.
That is the most critical distinction we need to make today. Using this method means you are softer on your delivery, but you are never softer on your standards.
I love that framing. Softer on delivery, not on standards.
Exactly. You still require the employee to meet the metrics. The boundary remains absolute. But the way you enforce that boundary is fluid. By asking for their perspective first, you force them to articulate their own shortcomings.
And often, they'll admit to the exact flaws you were going to point out anyway.
Right, but because they said it themselves, they own the problem. You haven't sacrificed your goals at all. You've just chosen a path of zero friction to achieve them.
Okay, I can see how that works in a formal, structured meeting. But what about the daily microaggressions? What if a coworker fires off a spicy message in a group chat? Say you're in a Slack or Teams channel with 10 other people, and a colleague explicitly blames you for a missed deadline.
The natural human instinct when someone attacks your competence publicly is to fire back just as sharply.
You want to defend your honor. You want to type back. Like, actually, Dave, if your team had delivered the assets on Tuesday like we agreed, we wouldn't be in this mess.
And hitting send on that message feels incredible for about 2 seconds.
Until the reality of the escalation sets in. Because Dave is now publicly cornered, which means he has to escalate again to save face. Now the whole channel is watching a professional meltdown.
And leadership is judging both of you for lacking emotional regulation. The rigid approach always creates collateral damage.
So the water-like move is what? Do you just sit there and take the blame in front of the whole department? Because honestly, that feels like professional suicide.
Not at all. Softness is an active, strategic maneuver, not a passive one. You don't take the blame, but you also refuse to return the aggression. You strip every ounce of ego out of the reply.
What would that sound like?
You type, "Good catch on that delay, Dave. Let me dig into the timeline discrepancy, and I'll follow up with a clear picture of what happened by noon."
Wow, that is infuriatingly calm.
It is. But think about the psychology of that response in a public forum. Dave came in expecting a collision. He threw a punch, and you weren't standing there. The tension instantly evaporates.
And more importantly, think about the audience, the 10 other people in that channel. Who looks like the mature, high-status leader in that exchange? The person throwing a tantrum, or the person who calmly absorbed the panic and took ownership of the next analytical step?
Exactly. You completely neutralize the aggression by refusing to match its frequency. You deny them the public conflict they were seeking.
Let's scale this up to something with even higher stakes, where actual money is directly on the line. Imagine a startup founder pitching a venture capitalist. The VC pushes back aggressively on the company's valuation, trying to bully the price down to get more equity.
If the founder matches that combative energy, they are essentially saying, "You're wrong, our tech is worth this, take it or leave it." And even if they manage to secure the funding, they're beginning a multi-year financial marriage built on a foundation of ego and resentment.
Right, and the sources mention a strategy here called Yiruke Gang, which means using softness to overcome hardness. How does the founder deploy that without just rolling over and giving away their company?
The founder stays perfectly centered. They don't get defensive about their life's work. They might even validate the VC's concern just to lower the emotional temperature. And then they reframe the conversation.
Like, I hear your concern on the valuation. Walk me through what specific metrics or risk factors are keeping you from getting to our number.
Yes. And let's see how that aligns with our growth models. You put the burden of proof back on them.
You're making them explain their logic, which forces them out of attack mode and into an analytical partnership.
Exactly. You are employing the concept of shun shit or way, which translates to acting in accordance with the momentum. The VC's momentum was an aggressive negotiation push.
So instead of building a dam to stop that water, you dig a channel to direct it. You yield to their momentum by inviting them to negotiate, but you structure that negotiation on your terms, guided by your question. Let me challenge this, though. What if the VC just rejects the reframe? What if they say, I'm not here to build a financial model with you. The valuation is 10 million, deal or no deal.
Yeah.
If I'm using strategic non-resistance, don't I just have to accept the bad deal?
Not at all. And this is a vital nuance. Softness applies to how you hold your boundaries, including the boundary of walking away.
So I can be soft and still walk away.
Absolutely. If they draw a hard line that violates your standards, the yielding approach isn't to accept it, nor is it to storm out in a rage. The soft exit sounds like this. I appreciate the directness. Based on our current revenue trajectory, that number doesn't map to what we need to execute our roadmap. It sounds like we aren't quite aligned for this round, but I'd love to keep the door open and share our progress for Series A.
Wow, you maintain absolute firmness on the valuation standard, but the delivery is so graceful that you actually preserve the relationship. You didn't burn a bridge, you just calmly walked around it.
And that leads directly into one of the most difficult scenarios professionals face.
Yeah.
The boundary-pushing client.
Oh, this is exactly where I struggle with going with the flow. Say you run an agency, and you have a difficult client who just keeps moving the goalposts. They keep changing the scope of the project, asking for just one more little feature or one more quick revision. If my strategy is non-resistance, I'm going to end up working for free. I'll lose money.
This scenario is the ultimate test of Laozi's philosophy, actually, and it reveals its deepest layer. True softness is actually the most secure, impenetrable way to hold a firm boundary.
Walk me through that. Because my instinct when a client asks for free work is to build a fortress wall. My instinct is to say, that is out of scope, check the contract.
Which is legally accurate, of course, but relationally disastrous. Think about the tension that creates. You've immediately positioned yourself as an adversary. You feel exploited, and the client feels nickel and dime.
Right, it's pure friction. You are relying on the rigidity of a contract to do the heavy lifting, which just makes the client want to push against it harder. I can feel my blood pressure rising just thinking about those emails.
So how do you use a yielding approach to defend a financial boundary? When they ask for the out-of-scope feature, you don't say no. You agree with their underlying goal.
You agree with him?
Yes. You say, I love that idea. That feature would add a ton of value to the final product. Let's look at what adjusting the scope to include that will mean for our current timeline and the budget.
But wait, let's push this further. What if they reply, well, we really don't have any more budget for this phase, but we desperately need this feature for the launch. Can you just squeeze it in? I tried being water, and now I'm cornered.
You aren't cornered, you just haven't finished flowing. You still don't build a wall, you align yourself with their constraint.
How?
You reply, I completely understand working within a tight budget constraint. Given that we can't increase the budget for this phase, which of the originally planned features should we swap out to make room for this new one?
Oh, that is brilliant. You force them to make the trade-off.
Exactly. Notice what happened to your boundary. Did you give up a single hour of unpaid work? No. Did you tell the client no? Also no.
You validated their idea, you validated their budget constraint, but you introduced the unavoidable reality of resource limits in a completely non-confrontational way.
You act like gravity. Gravity doesn't argue with you when you drop a glass, it just quietly enforces the law of physics.
The boundary remains 100% intact, but you fundamentally change the emotional temperature of the room. They don't feel attacked. They feel like you're sitting on the same side of the table, helping them solve a puzzle.
Now, Lazius is not suggesting that hardness is entirely useless in the world. He isn't telling us to be jellyfish without spines.
Right.
A sword has its specific place. If a client is being overtly abusive or someone is crossing a severe ethical line, you don't use conversational judo, you use a wall. Sometimes you absolutely need to be rigid.
But the danger is making rigidity your default setting. If your only tool for dealing with stress is building a wall, eventually you run out of bricks.
Precisely. His warning is that rigidity without flexibility is inherently brittle. The practical rule for applying this ancient wisdom to your modern career is this: softness should always be your opening move.
Default to the yielding approach and escalate to firmness only when the situation absolutely demands it. Listening to all these scenarios, I'm realizing something profound about this dynamic.
What's that?
It's almost like softness is a form of supreme, quiet confidence. You don't need to loudly prove you're strong. You don't need to yell or posture or send aggressive emails because you already know you have the leverage. You already know your internal boundaries are secure.
That's a beautiful way to synthesize it.
Right. The massive boulder sitting in the river doesn't need to prove anything to the water. It just sits there, being rigid and hard. But the water, yielding and flowing and adapting to every obstacle, the water still wins. Over time, it wears the boulder down to sand.
It requires immense internal strength to remain soft when external pressures are trying to force you into a rigid defensive posture. It's much easier to give in to the amygdala and shout back. It takes real discipline to remain fluid.
We've covered some incredibly valuable ground today. We took a 2,500-year-old proverb, "The soft and weak overcomes the hard and strong," and translated it into a highly psychological daily playbook.
The versatility of the concept is what makes it so enduring. Whether you're navigating a public conflict in a Slack thread, holding the line on a startup valuation with aggressive investors, or managing the performance of your own team.
The underlying cognitive mechanics remain exactly the same. The key takeaway is to be water, not a wall. Absorb the momentum, redirect the aggressive energy, force the conversation back into the logical parts of the brain, and stay fiercely focused on your goals without getting dragged into pointless ego battles.
Defaulting to softness really is the smarter, more biologically sustainable strategy. It allows you to navigate professional hazards without absorbing all the damage.
And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave you, our listener, with as you go about the rest of your day. We've established that strategic softness is ultimately a manifestation of deep confidence, and that rigidity, the yelling, the posturing, the defensive emails, is often just a reflexive, fear-based defense mechanism.
So true.
So as you look at your own calendar this week, ask yourself this: how much of your daily exhaustion and burnout at work simply comes from the immense mental and emotional toll of constantly trying to be a rock in situations where you could easily, and much more successfully, choose to be water?
hope you loved today's 8-minute upgrade. Don't forget to subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time.